Welcome to the lecture on plant pathology. And we have a course on the integrated pest management principles in plant pathology. And I would encourage you to look at all of our integrated pest management series, ABT 81, 2, and 3. We have IPM principles in weed science, entomology, insects, and plant pathology, which are the organisms that cause diseases of plants. So pathology is the study of diseases. And this was graciously provided, this presentation, by Dr. Stephen Kowicki. And it's a great overview. I've been using it for quite some time, made very few changes over the years because the basics of plant pathology don't change. A lot of the specifics change, how we respond to different pathogens, but I'm going to try to squeeze the important things of an 16-week course of integrated pest management principles in plant pathology down into a single lecture. What are the key components? So, why do we need to study plant diseases in the first place? Because pathology is important for humans because it affects all plants in nature, in our gardens, at our businesses, and in our economy for our food, fiber, ornamentals, everything. Can have significant impacts on human health. The Irish potato famine, for example, was as a result of a root pathogen, a root fungus that wiped out a huge portion of the potato crop in Ireland a long time ago. You could look that up. But a lot of starvation, and it led to a lot of Irish immigration to the United States because of that event. So huge impact on human, not just the health, but even social issues and immigration patterns. Certain pathogens can be dangerous if you eat them, some not so much, but lots of factors that can be side effects of plant pathology. Certainly the quality of our crops, the quality of our fiber, the quality of our wood, all are impacted by the health of the plant. And diseases are difficult to control. We need to know about them. We need to understand them. We need to study them in order to have some educated goals, what to do about them. So if I had to say there's one slide to really study the most, this is it. This is the slide. And you need to know this disease triangle. You need all three components or all three legs of the triangle in order to have a possibility of disease. If all three of these things come together, you might get disease. You might not. It's not a guarantee. I can almost guarantee you that you have, at this very moment, pathogens right on the fingertips that you're using on your computer device right now, things that could cause you serious harm. Does that mean you are having a problem with the disease? There are diseases potentially for you. Are you resistant? Maybe. Or is the environment not right? There's something causing that disease that's on your hands right now or on your arms right now, causing it to just hang out and not spread, not cause a problem. So anyway, what are these three components? You need a host for any type of disease to occur. The host is the organism that is going to become diseased or infected. In this case, it's plant pathology, so we're talking about a susceptible plant, as opposed to a resistant plant. A resistant plant can't get that disease, but you can't find a plant that's resistant to everything. It'll be resistant to some things. Every plant is resistant to some things. And you just have to find something that is resistant to those pathogens in your area. The second thing you need is a pathogen itself. And we call it a pathogen. We don't call it the disease because it's not. We'll talk about that more later. But the pathogen, we call it the virulent agent because it can cause some sort of a response in the host. That's what we call disease. So it's virulent because it can have a detrimental response when it is growing on or in the host. And then we need the environmental conditions, the right temperature, the right sunlight or darkness, the right humidity or moisture levels, and all of the things have to come together in the environment that allow the pathogen to grow in an effective way. And if you have a pathogen on a susceptible host under the suitable conditions, then it's possible that you have disease develop. And again, disease is the response of the host, not the pathogen. Although people talk about the pathogen as the disease all the time. If you have a flu, the flu virus is the pathogen. The disease is what your body is doing to respond to the pathogen. Your body is making the fever. Your body is making the runny nose. Your body is coughing. Your body is causing the disease in response to what it perceives as a threat from the pathogen. So here's an example, sudden oak death, which is a root fungal disease called Phytophthora ramorum. And it's called sudden oak death because you don't really see that it's there until boom, it finally does so much damage to the vascular tissues of the tree that it looks like it dies very suddenly, even though the infection might have been going on for a very long time. Serious problem in California. So let's look at a case study of the sudden oak death using the concepts of the disease triangle. If we have a coast live oak tree in the forest during the rainy season, what do you have? The coast live oak is susceptible. You got the host, susceptible host. The pathogen present, well, in forests of California, yeah, it's present everywhere. This Phytophthora is everywhere throughout the forests of the western United States. Is the environment suitable? It's the rainy season. Yes. Can you or will you get disease? Yes. Now, if you always got the disease, then every oak tree in California would be dead. Every susceptible oak tree in California would be dead. And that's not the case. So can you get the disease? Yes. What about a red oak in the forest during the rainy season? The red oak is not a susceptible host. Red oak is not susceptible to Phytophthora ramorum. So if red oak is not susceptible to Phytophthora ramorum, you cannot get disease. Coast live oak in the forest in the summer. Well, the summer, you don't have a suitable environment. So you don't get disease during the summer. Now, the problem there is oaks live for many, many, many years, decades, or centuries. So the fact that it didn't get it during the summer, it's got to live through all the winters too. So yeah, you don't get disease during that summer period starting, but you can get it in subsequent winters. What about coast live oak in a nursery quarantine? In a nursery quarantine area, you've removed the pathogen by having a clean environment in a nursery quarantine area. Unlike out in the forest and the wild where Phytophthora is everywhere, in a properly sanitized quarantine environment of a nursery, the pathogen isn't there. So it doesn't matter that it's raining with a susceptible host, and the disease could be happier than can be. It's not going to get the disease because the pathogen isn't there, period. So here's another one. This is some tomatoes. You can see the individual tomato plants look pretty bad, and the plants themselves look like somebody went through there with a flamethrower or something. This is called late blight of tomato, another fungal pathogen. And we'll go through the same exercise. Tomato in the rain or fog or sprinkler irrigation anywhere. Is there a susceptible host? Yes, tomato susceptible host. Is the pathogen present? Unless you're in a quarantine area, the pathogen's always present. Is that an environment that's suitable? Yeah, when it's wet, rainy, foggy, sprinkler irrigation, that is a suitable environment. You can get disease. What if you do drip irrigation? If you do drip irrigation, you remove the suitable environment, but you can't remove fog or rain. Even if you go to drip irrigation, Mother Nature can still wet your plants and give it a suitable environment. But if you have drip irrigation, and I would say and dry conditions rather than or, then you can't have disease because the late blight requires free moisture on the leaves. What about if you have fungicides? What have you done with fungicides? If they're the proper fungicides, you've killed the pathogen. You've killed the late blight organism. Now, late blight is the name of the disease response. The pathogen has its own name, but a lot of times we talk about late blight and we're talking about the pathogen. It's kind of a casual misuse that happens all the time in agriculture and science in general. When we're talking about diseases and pathogens, we kind of blend them together. The disease is the host's response to a pathogen. The pathogen is the organism, and I can't say off the top of my head what late blight is, but it has a scientific Latin name. That is the genus and species of the late blight fungal organism, and late blight is the tomato's response. Anyway, now you'll notice that no is in parentheses here because are fungicides perfect? No. Fungicides are not perfect. So even though you've removed the pathogen, it's possible that there is some that didn't get killed by your spray routine. Maybe the chemical isn't too effective or as effective as you thought it was. Or maybe the population of late blight causing organisms living in your area have developed resistance. So there's no with a qualification. What if I have peppers, which are a close relative of tomatoes in the same family, but they're not susceptible to late blight? At least some of them. I don't know if all of them are resistant, but you can stop late blight by saying, you know what? I've got too big of a late blight risk in this particular location. I'm not going to take a risk. I'm not going to put my money on tomatoes. I'm going to grow peppers. I've prevented the disease by growing something that's not susceptible, a host that's not susceptible. Now, you haven't removed all risk because late blight is one of thousands of different pathogens. And as soon as I plant peppers, there might be some other pathogen of peppers that's in the area. So you have to think it through. What are the crops that are most likely to do well in a given area and have the least number of concerns of pathogens? Or if there are concerns of pathogens, there's some strategy to prevent the disease, either by controlling the environment or by controlling the pathogen through sanitation, through pesticides, through other means. But you can see only if you have all three, susceptible host, pathogen, and a suitable environment, you have to have all three in order to have a possibility of getting disease. So we're talking about diseases, but there are three major categories of plant problems where you say, wow, something's wrong with that plant. And diseases are called by a biotic agent or pathogen. And we don't say living things because viruses technically aren't living things, but they are biotic agents. They're more like a highly sophisticated parasitic contaminant, a piece of sophisticated DNA and protein that has escaped from other living things to cause some damage because they can't reproduce on themselves. A virus requires the mechanisms of the cells in the plant or the cells in your body to reproduce. So if I have a cold, the cold virus can't do anything on its own. It's just a piece of DNA and protein. I think colds are DNA. Yeah, it's not RNA. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's a DNA virus with a protein coat. That's it. It can't do anything. But if it gets into a cell in my nose, that cold virus then is recognized by the mechanisms of my cell inside the lining of my nose, and the mechanism says, oop, there's a piece of DNA, quick, copy it. There's instructions here to copy it. And our own body takes a virus and it's tricked into using it as blueprints to do work. But it's our own cells that are doing the work. The virus is just a blueprint for instructions to do something. And what is it telling it to do? Make more virus. That's what it does. So, it's somewhat of a philosophical argument, but it doesn't really matter. Are viruses alive? Most scientists say technically no. And they are a very important pathogen. They can certainly cause disease. And so biotic agents are all of those things. We'll have a list later that can be pathogenic. So bacteria, fungi, viruses, nematodes, etc. We'll get to that list in a minute. But those are the diseases, the main focus of this presentation. In addition, there are other categories of plant problems. One is called disorders. A disorder might look like a disease, but it's resulting from some physiological factor. Maybe there's a nutritional problem. It's nitrogen deficient. It's zinc deficient. Zinc deficiency looks like a virus sometimes. A number of deficiencies look like viruses. They're not. They're caused by a nutritional problem. Maybe there's a genetic abnormality. So there's some sort of a problem where either in the entire genes of the plant there is some sort of abnormality, or maybe there was just a problem in the apical meristem and one branch has this odd problem, but it's not in the rest of the plant. There was some sort of a DNA mistake leading to a problem that was only replicated on one branch. Those types of problems are called disorder because they look like diseases, they're problems. They are biological in nature because it's the workings of the plant's internal mechanisms, but it's not the same as being caused by a pathogen. They're disorders. Usually we talk about them almost all the time. I've run into true disorders. We're talking about nutritional disorders, but that's not the only category. Conditions are abiotic, or without biotic life, non-living factors. So you get a heat wave, you get a cold spell, you get freeze burn, chemical burn. So you spray a pesticide or a foliar nutrient and you just fried your plants. It was applied when it was too hot, you put it on too concentrated, whatever. So chemical burns, salt burns like water that is too salty. Well water that is too salty causes a salt burn, which is another type of chemical burn. Physical damage, we would call damage done by the cultivators on the tractor steel worm. Yeah, we got nailed by steel worm out in our trial. Well, steel worm, it means that's the steel from some implement on the cultivator nailed our plants. But it could be hail. It could be any number of different physical damage problems. Even insect biting damage could be considered a condition if it's not spreading disease. But once you have a condition, that can lead to a disease, because now you've got wounds, you've got problems, you've got stress. Disorders, the same thing. You've got stresses. And when plants are stressed due to some disorder or condition, they are much more likely to be more susceptible to pathogens to cause disease. So let's take a quick break. I'll be back in a few seconds.